Hello, welcome to this Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob, and in this exciting video, we're going to be looking at the Maggotkin of Nurgle Battle Pack for Age of Sigmar 4. We're going to be looking at all the units and all the rules, and I'm going to be breaking them down, hopefully to give you a good idea of the units you might want to take and why you might want to play them. This is the first of many videos I'm going to make about the Maggotkin of Nurgle, which is going to be very cool. We're going to do some tier lists, we're going to do some unit reviews, we're going to do some list reviews, and I know at the time of recording, Nurgle is already, the game is already out, and then we're already like 2 or 3 weeks into competitive Age of Sigmar 4. But that's still very, very early. Most people are still learning their armies. Some people haven't even put any models on the table yet. So I still think this is a good time, and it's a good place to put this video. So I'm excited to break down the Nurgle Battle Pack for you. I hope you enjoy it. I've got a Patreon if you want to help support any content I do. I'd love the support. Let's get straight in and look at the battle traits. So the first thing we're going to look at are the battle traits. And these are pretty interesting for Nurgle. They're going to really define how your army plays, I think, because you have this ability to apply disease to enemy units. First off, let's start out with the Blessed by the Plague Father ability. Once per turn, at the end of any turn, you can pick one of the following effects. This is going to be the end of every turn as well. In fact, you pick an enemy unit that is in combat with a friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle unit to be the target. The target has the diseased keyword. Now, this isn't the only way to get disease on enemy units, but so probably what you're going to want to do is do the other ways and then use the next effect, which is spread. Pick a diseased enemy unit to be the target. Each other enemy unit within the target's combat range, so within 3 inches, has the diseased keyword. So this has the opportunity to spread disease amongst a lot of enemy units, which is definitely what you want. And then mutate, if all enemy units on the battlefield have a disease keyword, inflict 1 mortal damage on each of them. Now, the reason you're probably going to want to have as many diseased units as possible is because of 2 things. The first one is the ability racked with disease, which is the done at the end of any turn. The effect is that you roll a d3 for each diseased unit, and on a 2+, inflict an amount of mortal damage on that unit equal to the roll. Now, that's quite a lot of potential mortal damage you can do at the end of every turn over multiple different units, which is quite nice. And in addition, you've got a passive called Desperate Remedies, where if a diseased enemy unit uses an ability that would heal or return slain models to it, instead of healing or returning any slain models, that unit no longer has a disease keyword. So this is kind of like a double-edged sword. Number one, you get the opportunity to make it so your opponent can't heal, or at least can't heal for 1 turn. That's actually pretty powerful, especially with some units that do a lot of healing. Troggoths is an example. Like if you can make it so Trug can't heal at the beginning of each turn, that's quite nice. I really like that. However, that does mean it removes that diseased ability, and you're going to want to spread as much disease as possible. So that's very strong. However, the opponent is going to have lots of ways to get rid of your disease tokens. For instance, they're going to be able to use Rally as an ability. They'll be able to bring manifestations that can do healing. They'll have, if they're certain armies like Troggoths and Sylvaneth and Soulblight Gravelords, they'll have a lot of healing or returning models built into their army as well. So there's the potential that they're going to shut down absolutely tons of your synergy, which is a tough time for you. So it really is going to be matchup dependent, and it also feels like you're going to have to do a lot of work. If your opponent understands how mutating disease or how spreading the disease works, they're going to always try and have their units really spread far apart. In some cases, some battle plans, some missions, or even just some engagements, that might be easier said than done. So you might just end up with a bunch of units having disease. The mortal wounds are also really nice. That's what you're gearing towards. So either shutting down enemy healing or doing mortal damage. That's not a bad set of allegiance abilities. It's just going to be harder to use than some of the other people's. The next thing we're going to look at before we talk about battle formations is the fact that as a Nurgle player, you'll bring a Feculent Nmo, a free piece of terrain to your army, although obviously you've got to spend money on it. Feculent Nmo is pretty interesting. It's got 7 health, a 5-up save, and a 5-up ward save. So that's quite survivable. But it isn't as intrinsically important as some other terrain features. Obviously, something like a Loon Shrine for Gloomspite Gits is a good example, where that bringing models back from it. Instead, it just has 2 nice abilities. First one is Riddle with Disease, which happens at the end of any turn, and it's once per turn across the army, so only one of your Feculent Nmos can do it. You pick an enemy unit within 6 inches of this terrain feature to be the target. Then you roll a dice on a 4-up, that target has the diseased keyword. Now, that's pretty good. It's obviously situational, and it is a double stipulation. You've got to be within 6 inches, you've got to roll a 4-up. But more potential vectors of disease across the army is fine. It's free to use, who cares? And in addition, it's got its own combat profile where it's got 4 attacks that do damage D3. And while this isn't incredible, having it be somewhere near a back objective, so your opponent is going to really struggle to grab objectives or it's going to zone out objectives, you can still charge it. And in fact, you can even move near it or deep strike near it as well. But what I mean by that is it's going to be something your opponent may have to fight if it tries to grab an objective. And some units aren't going to be, some armies aren't necessarily going to want to fight something that can do that. But it's survivable enough, I guess. So, Feculent Nmo, I think it's okay. It's obviously not brilliant, but it's also not meant to be brilliant like other units. Next thing we're going to look at are the battle formations. There are 4 battle formations, and these are chosen before the game starts on your army list. So when you write your army list, you'll choose one of those. I garbled that. I apologize. Anyway, the 4 to choose from. The first one is the Taliban of Nurgle. This gives you the passive Disease and Pestilence personified. From the second battle round onwards, add 1 to the amounts of mortal damage inflicted by the Racked with Disease ability. That's when you can do D3 for every disease unit on the board. It's pretty nice because that's potentially 4 mortal damage at the end of every turn. That feels like that's very strong, and that ties in with how your allegiance ability works. Next one, Nurgle's Menagerie gives you the passive Tenders of the Garden Grotesque. During the army composition, you can include 2 Feculent Nmos in your army instead of 1. That isn't as good as having more disease, so you're not going to take that. The next one is the Plague Cyst, and this gives you the passive, the Vectors of Contagion, where each time a model in a friendly Rotbringer's unit is slain by a combat attack, and that model is in combat with the attacking unit, you roll a number of dice equal to the slain model's health characteristic to a maximum of 4. For each 5+, you inflict 1 mortal damage on the attacking unit after the fight ability has been resolved. Now, this would feel very good if you were able to get lots more healing into the Rotbringers and maybe bring models back. But this is just something that's going to happen if your models die, which is fine. Like, maybe you can put an absolute ton of Rotbringers on the board and your opponent just kind of chews through units, and it always gives you some retaliation, which is okay. But I think I prefer more disease, but I could see this having some play. And the last one, the Affliction Cyst, is once per battle across the army in the deployment phase, pick up to 2 friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle units that have fly, which is a keyword you can see located at the bottom of their war scroll. The effect is you remove the targets from the battlefield and set them up again on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units. So you've got 2 great flying units in this roster. You have Puskul Blight Lords, which are Rotbringers, and they start as a unit of 2 and can be reinforced to a unit of 4. So you could have 8 of the flies immediately 9 inches away from your opponent's territory. Then when the first turn starts, you can just move them and charge them in if you get the first turn. That's pretty nice. You can also use the Plague Drones, which is, again, a flying unit, and this is a unit of 3, which can be reinforced to a unit of 6. So that would put 12 flies in your opponent's 9 inches away. Again, move and then charge. The reason this is good is because the Great Unclean one, when we talk about it later, has got the ability to bring demon units back from the dead at half strength. And that's pretty good, because then you can do something that we call an alpha pin, where you'd put 2 units of 6 flies right in front of your opponent's lines, take the turn, charge them in, make it so your opponent cannot move out of their territory, which means they're going to struggle to score a lot of battle tactics. Then when they finally killed a unit of flies, your Great and Clean one is going to be able to bring them back from the dead, or at least a unit half the size, and you can kind of recycle the process, maybe not as effective. This is ignoring all the potential damage that they're going to do. So that's pretty good. I think Affliction Cyst, or the ability to pass more disease from the Taliban of Nurgle, feel like the better ones. Let me know what you think in the comments below. On your army list, one of your heroes does not have to be a general and cannot be a unit with a unique keyword, which you can see located at the bottom of their war scroll. One of your heroes is going to be able to choose a heroic trait. There are 3 to choose from. The first one is a passive called the Gift of Furbile Frenzy. You add 1 inch to the move characteristic of friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle units that do not have fly if they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit at the start. Now, that's quite nice if you're taking a more foot-based army. And in addition, the fact that it's Maggotkin of Nurgle, so it's going to apply to both the mortal and the demon units, gives it that kind of all-round utility, which I quite like. The next one is Grandfather's Blessing, which is done at the end of any turn, which does mean every turn. And the effect of this is if this unit is in combat with a diseased enemy unit, you can heal D6 to this unit. Now, that's pretty nice, especially as the Great Unclean one is going to most likely be something that you see. if you're running all demons, because the Great Unclean One brings demons back from the dead. And why are you not going to take that? I don't know. And healing D6 on that is good. This is also good on any character. Healing D6 at the end of every turn. You've got great armor saves and good war saves in this army, so you could be very survivable, and healing is going to make it even more problematic. And the next ability is called Overpowering Stench. This is a reaction that you make to your opponent declaring a command for a unit in combat with this unit. You roll a dice, and on a 5-up, that command has no effect. The command still counts as having been used, and the command points spent to use the command are still lost. Now, that isn't bad, especially if you've got a large base, or if you're just trying to make it so that you can shut down some of the strong command abilities you can see on certain units. However, that does require that unit to be in combat at the right time, and probably is more effective to either make your army move faster or heal up more. On your army list, you're also going to be able to choose an artifact for one of your heroes. Again, it can't be on a unique unit, and does not have to be on your general. The 3 that are here, I'll read out the one you're going to take. It's called the Witherstave, which in any combat phase, you pick an enemy unit that charges this turn as in combat with this unit to be the target. You roll a dice, and on a 4-up, the target has strike last for the rest of the turn. Now, it does require your opponent to have charged, and it does require you to roll a 4-up. But strike last is sensationally effective, so that's really good. The other one is once per battle, the Carrion Dirge in any hero phase, where you can pick up to 3 enemy units within 12 inches and subtract 3 from each target's control score for the rest of the turn. They're unfortunately not in the same league, so you'll always take the Witherstave. And the last one, once per battle, in any combat phase, is the Rustfang. Pick an enemy hero in combat with this unit to be the target, subtract 1 from the save roll to the target for the rest of the battle. Now, I kind of like that, honestly. The Strike Last one is, I think, better. But -1 to save rolls, it's the centerpiece edition. Your Great Unclean Ones, your Archeons, your probably not Maw Crushers, they're not great. But like a bunch of different units, those centerpieces, a lot of allegiance abilities are centered around those centerpiece models. So making it so that they're minus to their armor save, so they're easier to burn down and get. That feels pretty good, but I still think Strike Last is probably better. Also, you have access to your own unique spell lore, the Lore of Malignance. You have 3 spells, and your first spell, Fleshy Abundance, is a unlimited spell. This means every wizard in your army can cast the spell or attempt to cast the spell, but the same wizard cannot cast it more than once. This is different to normal spells, which can only be attempted once by all of your wizards. So if you have 3 wizards, they can only attempt a spell normally once between them, but now they can all attempt to cast Fleshy Abundance. It's a pretty good spell. It's you pick a friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle wizard, then you pick a Maggotkin of Nurgle unit, and that's great because again, it's not locked to just demons or something. Holding within 12 inches of them to be the target, and then if the target unit is damaged, you heal D3. This is good on top of other healing available. If the target is not damaged, subtract 1 from the wound rolls for attacks that target that unit until the start of your next turn. -1 is an incredible ability. The duration of the spell is also great because it's until the start of your next turn. And then healing is also really positive as well. So I love that. Now we've got 2 other spells. The first one is Cloying Quagmire, cast on a 7. You pick an enemy unit within 18 inches of the caster. It doesn't have to be wholly within, but it does have to be visible. And then you halve the target's move characteristic until the start of your next turn. If the target's save characteristic is 3 or better, so if it's a 3+ or a 2+, subtract 1 from run rolls and charge rolls for that unit until the start of the next turn. Now that's an incredibly powerful ability, shutting down your opponent's movement, but also charging their halving their charges. So it's only 1 dice is super strong. In addition, it's just -1 to the charge roll. Sorry. In addition, it's still until the start of next turn, which is also great. And lastly, the Magnificent Bubos, which is cast on a 7. You pick an enemy visible enemy hero within 18 inches, and then until the start of your next turn, subtract 1 from hit rolls for the target's attacks, subtract 1 from casting rolls, chanting rolls, banishment rolls, and binding rolls for the target. This is really good because it's going to shut down your opponent's ability to stop your spells, also to get their own spells off. It's just really nice. So it's a good spell lore, really. You got the ability to mess with your enemy's synergy. You got the ability to mess with your opponent's key units in their speed, thanks to Cloying Quagmire. And you've got the ability to buff your units and also debuff the enemy, making your units -1 to be wounded, and also giving them the ability to heal. Pretty good spell lore. So let's look at the units. And the first one that we're going to look at is Rotigus. Rotigus is a unique unit and it's got 22 health with a 4-up armor save and a 5-up ward save, making this an incredibly survivable unit. He's also a War Master, therefore will be the general in your army, unless you have another unit that's a War Master, in which case you choose between the two. It's unique, so you can't give them any traits or any artifacts, and pretty impressively has got Wizard level 2. This is great, seeing as Wizard level 2, some units are just like basically wizards, but this is a massively monstrous, survivable unit that is also a level 2 caster, which is good. The ability to bring all those manifestations, all the spell lore to bear, feels like it's really good. In addition, it's got its own unique spell, which is benefited thanks to the Bringer of Plenty passive that you have here, that adds 1 to the casting rolls for this unit. So 2 cast with +1 to cast. That's nice. And the spell, it's got its unique spell, is cast on the 8, making +1 to cast, giving it a 7. And it's called Deluge of Nurgle, where you pick each diseased enemy unit on the battlefield and each friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle unit in combat with any diseased enemy units to be the targets. Then make a casting roll. If you succeed, then you roll a d3 for each target. On a 2+, you inflict an amount of mortal damage on each enemy target equal to the roll. You heal X for each friendly target, where X is the amount equal to the roll. So, stacked with a battle formation to add +1 to the mortal damage that you can do from diseased units, and the fact that you'll do disease damage at the end of every turn to diseased units, you can cast this both in your hero phase and your opponent's hero phase using a command ability for an absolutely ton of mortal damage. The real secret sauce, which we'll get to in a minute, is the fact that applying disease is really hard to do. So I think that's going to be the key factor that you're going to have to work towards. In addition to being sensationally survivable, he's a monster, so he's got control value 5, so it's going to help with capping objectives. Is fast enough at movement 6. Is not brilliant in combat, but will do some work with 5 attacks, damage 3. I guess the only really sad part is it's only red 1. It's got 2 attacks that are damage 2, and then 10 attacks, which is damage 1 from the Nurglings, all with crit auto wound. And lastly, it's got a pretty nice rampage, which is done in any charge phase, and it's only done once per turn across the army. If this unit charges phase, you roll a dice on a 3+, you pick an enemy unit within an inch of it, you roll a number of dice equal to the number of models in the target unit, and for each 5+, you inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. So that's the same ability that the Suffocating Gravetide has, where it charges in and it does an amount of mortal damage equal to the models in the unit, which is what we call a horde clearing spell. So it is very strong and can potentially kill a lot of models, which is nice. But he's not going to go up toe for toe against some of the big melee monsters that are in the game, but could be more survivable thanks to some healing from the unlimited spell, which is kind of nice. And ultimately, the -1 to wound spell as well, and the fact that it's just so survivable with a 4-up and a 5-up. But you are going to have to really lean into wanting to do a load of disease to want to take Rotigus. So let's go look at the Great Unclean One. The next unit, the Great Unclean One, is pretty interesting because, like many of the other greater demons that aren't named, it has a core ability which, well, it's not core keyword, sorry. It has a key ability which is going to be so impactful in your game that you're probably always going to bring it, especially if you're running demons. So survivability is very similar to Rotigus. With 20 health and a 4-up save and a 5-up ward save, this 2-cast wizard is absolutely stonking on the survivability. It's also a 2-cast wizard. I don't know if I mentioned that, which is really, really, really good. In addition, it's got a great spell, which is cast on a 7, called Plague Wind. Pick a visible enemy unit within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. The target has the diseased keyword. This is nice to cast in your turn and your opponent's turn. This gives you an opportunity to spread even more disease. In fact, it's even better in your opponent's turn because of when their opponent do all of their hero phase abilities, then you'll do your hero phase ability. Then the turn will progress. And then at the end, when you're trying to spread disease at the end of the turn, because they should have skipped all of their healing at that point, because it's normally done in hero phase, then you'll be able to spread more disease. So this is really the springboard for doing your disease mechanic. Add on to this the fact that you can give the ability to heal D6 at the end of any turn when in combat with disease units, and the ability to make it so that your opponent charges you, they strike last on a 4+, That makes this survivable and also a great tech piece. But this isn't even the best thing about the Great Unclean One. The best thing about the Great Unclean One is the Locus of Nurgle, which is done once per turn across the army in your movement phase. So you'll have 5 chances to do this. You pick a friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle demon unit that started the battle with 3 or more models. Roll a dice, and on a 4-up, set up a replacement unit with half the number of models from the target unit rounding up. Now, it's inconsistent. Your unit needs to have died to be able to use this ability. But it does mean if your opponent kills 6 flies, for example, or 20 Playbearers, bringing back 10 Playbearers or 3 flies is going to give you even more units to put on the board, hold objectives, get in the fight. That recursion is pretty massive for what is already a very survivable army. In addition to this, he's got a rampage called Blobe with Corruption, which once per turn across the army is done at the end of any turn. If this unit is damaged, pick up to 3 enemy units in combat with this unit to be the targets. Roll a d3 for each target, and on a 2+, inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. So the fact that you're able to apply disease and then maybe spread disease and then do even more mortal damage with this unit at the end could massively tip the scale on how many models are left holding objectives, which is really good. And lastly, not too bad in combat. 4 attacks, 3s and 2s, Rend 2, damage 4 with a Colossal Blight weapon. Can do some real hurt. And then 10 attacks with the Nurglings. But for some reason has an absolutely outrageously good shooting attack with 7-inch range, which can shoot into combat, so it can be done while in combat. With D3 plus 3 attacks, 3s, 2s, Rend 2, damage 2, meaning he definitely outperforms, or it definitely outperforms Rotigus in the combat profile. And then also that can be used in your opponent's turn, you know, with that ability, which is also strong to shoot the closest unit. D3 plus 3 again, that's good. I think ultimately, if you're running demons, because it's only demons that can come back from the dead, you're going to do it, and you're going to take the Great and Clear one, and it feels like a must-have in this army. The next unit we'll look at is the Poxbringer Herald of Nurgle. Now, this is a very cheap 1-cast wizard and is useful if you're intending to take lots of Playbearers. 5 health with a 5-up save, very slow, only moves 4 inches, but like I said, is a level 1 wizard. So as long as a level 1 wizard doesn't cost any more than about 150 points, it's got utility in the fact it's got a wizard level, either because you're spell law or because of manifestations. But it does have its own unique ability and is more survivable than most wizards. It's got 5-up ward save. It's got its own unique ability called Captain the Plague Legions, where you get to fight immediately after this unit has fought with a unit of Plague Bearers, and if you do so, that unit gets +1 to hit rolls. The ability to fight immediately after this unit does not mean that you're able to move between the different steps that happen in the combat phase. There are 3 steps: the strike first step, the normal step, and the strike last step. If, for some reason, this Poxbringer was be able to fight in the strike first step, you would not be able to bring up that Plague Bearers to fight in the strike first step. They would fight first in the normal step. I know that's an incredibly long-winded thing to say, I know, but it is important to know because some people get a little bit carried away with reading that. And then if you do fight with that Plague Bearer unit, they get a +1 to hit rolls, which is nice because it saves you a command point, which is okay. Is it brilliant? Probably not, but it's there and it's available on a level 1 wizard. The next unit we'll look at is Horticul Slimu. I love this guy. So he is a fellow riding on a giant caterpillar, which we love. He has got a 5-up ward save and he's unique. That's important, so can't give him any traits or abilities and can only take 1 in your army. He's got 8 health, 4-up save, 5-up ward save, survivable enough. Is fairly slow, movement 4, makes sense. He's on a tiny little snail or whatever it is. And isn't good in combat with 4 attacks doing damage D3 and 3 attacks doing damage 2. So isn't a combat unit, and instead is like a support piece for the entire army. Let's talk about the first one. The first one is done in your movement phase. It's an ability called Cultivating the Garden of Nurgle. If there are fewer than 3 friendly Feculent Nmo on the battlefield, you can set up a Feculent Nmo wholly within 12 inches of this unit, more than 3 inches from all enemy units, objectives, and other terrain features. Now, this is pretty nice because when you do set this up, this means at the end of the turn, you're going to be able to use the Feculent Nmo's ability to, on a 4+, potentially put disease on a unit. So I'm bringing this guy to set up a tree, to then on a 4-up maybe give you disease and start that rolling effect of disease, spread disease, and start having lots of units with disease. Now that might work out really well. I'll have to put that on the tabletop and let me know if you have been playing with Slimu or if you plan on playing with Slimu to give that a try. That feels like a lot of work to apply a disease, which then at the end of the turn, I'll roll a dice on a 2-up. I'll do D3 mortal damage, especially into armies that heal a lot, but it feels like a lot of work for not a lot of reward. In addition, though, he's got this ability called Beast Handler, which is done once per turn in the army in your movement phase. Pick a friendly Beast of Nurgle unit that's been destroyed. On a 3-up, set up a replacement unit holding 12 inches this unit, more than 9 inches from all enemy units. Now, that's quite nice. I quite like that, especially if you're taking a lot of Beast of Nurgle, and the plan is to have them individually run off, grab objectives, get killed, bring another one back, keep doing that. Obviously, buddy this up with a Great Unclean One. Now, a Great Unclean One's got the ability to return more points worth of stuff. You know, 20 Playbearers back to 10 Playbearers, 6 flies back to 3 flies, and then keep doing that. But this is a more consistent return on a 3-up. And it puts your little Beast of Nurgle on, and they're very difficult. When we talk about Beast of Nurgle, they're very difficult to pin. Well, they're going to always be trying to get into combat with you, which is going to be a real problem. So I quite like that as well. But I think if I was running a Great Unclean One, I feel like I wouldn't then be running Beast of Nurgle, because I would be wasting its opportunity cost to bring models back from the dead by having Beast of Nurgle, which do not come back from the dead. With the Great Unclean One, they only come back with Slimux. So I'd probably go Slimux, Beasts, and then maybe Rotbringers, or I'd go Great Unclean One and no Slimux. But if you were to go Slimux, Rotigus, and the Great Unclean One, then you've got the ability to apply disease via Slimux, you've got the ability to apply disease versus the Great Unclean One, and then you've got the ability to maybe activate those disease units with Rotigus's spell. But that does require 2 spells to happen to really compound the effect that you're able to get from disease, but that could work out really well as long as you're not playing into any of the healing armies. The next hero we're going to look at, or next Demon Nurgle unit we're going to look at specifically, is the Spoilspox Scrivener, the Herald of Nurgle. He's not good in combat and he isn't good at shooting. The reason you're going to take the Spoilspox Scrivener is because of the ability keep counting, I'm watching you, which is an ability done once per turn across your army in your hero phase. So multiple Scriveners can't use this ability, only one. You pick a friendly Playbearers unit holding 12 inches, roll a dice on a 2+, one of the following effects apply. Add one to the attack characteristic of the target's melee weapons, and add one to the save rolls for the target. Now, I think +1 attack on a unit that can get +1 to wound on a giant brick of Playbearers, which then, if they do eventually get killed and come back from the dead, feels like pretty good value. As long as this guy is super cheap, being able to have +1 save or +1 to the attacks is very nice. So I think that that's okay if you're running loads of Playbearers. It's important to note as well that Playbearers do have crit mortals on their attacks. So a unit of 20 Playbearers having 1 attack each with crit mortals, then going up to 2 attacks each, is insane output for the army. So I feel like you're definitely going to take Playbearers with this guy because he's going to do so much damage. Our next hero is Sloppity Barpiper, Herald of Nurgle. He's got 5 health, 5 up save, 5 up ward, and is rubbish in combat. The reason you're bringing the Sloppity Bloop Bloop is because of his ability once per turn across the army, so only bring 1 for any combat phase to use the Jolly Gut Pipes. Pick a visible, friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle demon unit holding than 12 inches. Roll dice, and on a 2+, you inflict one of the effects. Number 1, add 1 to wound rolls to the target's attacks. That's great if you're going to use this on a big brick of, I don't know, flies or even the Great Unclean One. That's good. Early one evening, my pustule was a seeping. Ward rolls can't be made for damage points inflicted by the target's combat attacks, which is great. Again, you have a unit that's going to do a ton of damage. No ward saves is lovely. And then finally, my love is like a ripe fart. Subtract 1 from hit rolls to attacks made by any units that target the target unit. So that unit could be -1 to hit, and it can be -1 to wound. That feels very, very good to add to its survivability, which is really nice. So really good to bring along to support the rest of your army in the ways that you want them to do. And I think the fact that you get the choice on how you're going to support your army is good into different matchups in the meta. It's not always +1 to wound, but it's good if your enemy is -1 to wound. It's not always going to be ignoring wards because they might not have wards, and instead you might want to make your unit more survivable. So those options make your army better. The next unit, we're going to move away from heroes for a minute because we've talked about all the demons and all the demon synergy. So we're going to talk about the demon units and then start talking about the mortal units. So the first demon unit we're going to look at are Playbearers. Playbearers is a unit of 10 models, and each model in the unit has got 2 health with a 6 up save, and they move 4 inches. Now in combat, they're seem pretty woeful with only 1 attack each. Hit on 4, wound on 3, no rend damage 1. But they do have crit mortals, and we know we've got the ability to add literally double their output. And if you reinforce this unit to a unit of 20, that means they're going to have 40 health with a 6-up save and a 5-up ward save. They can be -1 to hit, they can be -1 to wound. That's very survivable with a control score of 1 for grabbing an objective. I guess the major issue is that they're slow. They only move 4 inches, so getting onto objectives or even getting in the battle can feel a little bit tough. But I feel like their job really is to screen or protect great unclean ones while they are maybe adding disease onto your opponent's units, getting into a little bit of a fight, but not taking the brunt of like a massive punch. And then if the Playbearers do eventually get killed, which 40 health with a 5-up ward save is very tough to actually kill, then you start bringing them back, and that's pretty good. So I don't think that they're super powerful, but I think they add to the flavor of the army in the way that you want them to do work, which is grabbing objectives. In addition, they've got a passive called Cloud of Flies, where you subtract 1 from hit rolls for shooting attacks that target this unit. So -1 to hit to this unit as well. That's great. We love that. That's good energy. That means, especially for certain units that are trying to just shoot them before they get anywhere, that's nice. But yeah, I like the Playbearers. I think they're good, and I think that they are a headache. I'm going to look at a unit of 20 Playbearers and ask myself, how am I going to shift them off an objective? And the answer is, I'm not really sure. You can use them to body block the center of the board to stop tactics. They have a control value of 1, so 20 are going to be good for holding terrain in your territory, stopping your opponent from grabbing terrain for a battle tactic as well. But speed is the issue for this unit, definitely. Our next unit are Nurglings. And a unit of Nurglings is 3 bases, 3 models, and each base has got 4 health each for a total of 12 across the unit. And therefore, they are reinforceable as well, so you can make a unit of 6, which would be a pretty prodigious health pool of 24 health. 6-up save, so Rend will pretty much wipe this unit out, but they do have a 5-up ward save. And in addition to help with their survivability, they have this ability at the end of any turn called Endless Swarm, where you heal 3 to this unit. So if you haven't wiped out one of the bases, they're going to be able to heal 3 on that base, which is pretty nice. They've got a control value of 1, but they aren't beasts, so even a unit of 6 is going to be a control score of 6. And they've got 5 attacks each with their tiny razor-sharp teeth, which is going to be 30 attacks. And there is a way to make it so their attacks have crit mortals, which we'll talk about in a bit. So you could actually have a lot of attacks doing crit mortals for this unit. They're slow, and they don't have any way of like moving anywhere around the board. Therefore, probably you're just better off with Playbearers, but they are a fun, interesting unit. The next unit we're going to look at are Beasts of Nurgle, and these are super fun because they mean you get to engage your opponent in their turn, which opponents normally hate. Each Beast of Nurgle is only a single model, and it's got 8 health with a 5-up save and a 5-up ward save. Don't forget, if we do take Slimu, we've got the opportunity to bring these back from the dead, which is pretty fun. Now, in combat, they've got 5 attacks, which is damage D3. And I wouldn't say that that's a particularly stunning profile. And they're also a beast. This unit has a maximum control score of 1. So they're not going to help you for grabbing objectives. But the reason that you're probably going to take them is because of this Attention Seeker's ability. And this is done in any charge phase, and it isn't locked to only a single Beast of Nurgle. Therefore, you could take multiple Beasts of Nurgle and use this ability. And let's just kind of break down how some of this works. It can get a little bit techie. If this unit is not in combat, you pick the closest enemy unit to be the target. If 2 or more enemy units are tied, you can choose whichever one you want. Then you make a charge roll of 2d6. Now that can be really confusing for some people because making a charge roll of 2d6 makes you feel like you're using the charge ability. This isn't the charge ability. This is a different ability with the charge keyword. Same way it has the move keyword at the bottom does not make this the move ability, it makes it a move ability. And the reason that that is important because it means you can do loads of other things. For example, you would be able to run in your turn, and then you would still be able to use this ability, right? Because it's not the charge ability, which is normally locked to not letting you run and charge, as an example, right? So that's important, and I know it's super techie, but I wanted to bring it up because it's important. But what's really important is multiple Beasts of Nurgles can attempt to make something that's like a charge ability, but they have to nominate a unit in both your charge phase and your opponent's charge phase, which is where it gets really good. Because if this unit can move a distance up to the value of the charge roll, during that move, this unit can move into combat and can pass through models in the target unit, but it must end that move within 1 inch of the target. Then inflict D3 mortal damage on the target. So multiple units charging in, multiple D3 mortal wound impact hits. This isn't a rubbish D3 where you roll a D3 on a 2+. This is just D3, which is pretty nice. Also, it means you can potentially do a counter charge, a redeploy in your opponent's turn, and then use this ability. So this is really strong for locking down enemy units. But because it's done in the order, so for instance, in your turn, if you're the Beast of Nurgle player, you'll do all of your charges and this ability first, and then they'll do their abilities. So in their turn, they'll have done all of their charges and charge abilities, and then you'll use this ability in the charge phase. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult to manage, but it is going to be really fun. Okay, and I think you could have a really good time with this, especially if you stack this with Slimux. I think the problem is the payoff isn't very big. You do D3 mortal damage on the charge, which I think Games Workshop may have overcosted, and then you have 5 attacks which do damage D3, which would be cool if it was more damage, but it's not, so it's fine, I guess. Our next unit are the Plague Drones. Now, Plague Drones is a unit of 3 models, and each model of the unit has got 5 health with a 5-up save and a 5-up ward save. So the unit of 3 is going to have 15 health or 30 health if you end up reinforcing the unit, which is an absolute brick of models to get past, especially as 3 of them can come back from a great and clean one. We already know that we've got that ability to potentially deep strike them in front of our enemy units at the beginning of the game before they move and do that alpha pin. Other than that, they move 8 inches, and they've got an okay combat profile. The Riders have got 2 attacks each with crit mortals and a champion. So unit 3 is going to have 7 attacks, 13 attacks from unit 6. So that's 2 or 3 mortals. And then the Rotfly Limbs got a lot of attacks, 6 attacks per model. So 18 across a unit of 3, 36 over a unit of 6. That's a lot of dice to give your opponent, but it hits on 4s, wounds on 3s, and has no rend. So it's not necessarily going to do a ton of damage. And you don't have loads of ways to really increase its output. If you could potentially give them +1 attack or something like that, that isn't there. So it does have another ability called Right Pastures as a passive. This unit can use charge abilities even if you use a retreat ability in the same turn. In addition, no mortal damage is inflicted on this unit by retreat abilities, which is okay, meaning I guess they're fairly mobile and you can get them out of a combat, get them back into a combat. But I think better than anything, this unit's job is just to absolutely pin a unit in and make it so that they're going to struggle to get through 30 health on a 5-up ward save, which is very, very tough to get through, but is not impossible for some of the bigger hitter units in the game. And then when it gets in combat, it's just going to keep doing a ton of damage. A vector for disease, I guess, but, you know, isn't necessarily going to slam into your opponent's big hitting units. The next unit we're going to talk about is another War Master unit. So we're back to heroes, and now we're starting to look at the mortal units. So the Maggotkin is a massive unit, 24 health with a 4-up save and a 5-up ward save. This is a sensationally survivable unit, and also has got control score of 10. So it's going to be absolutely brilliant for camping objectives and controlling the battle from where it is, especially if there ends up being a combat in the middle of the board or an objective in the middle of the board. And in combat, it's pretty good with 4 attacks from Gurk's Tentacle, which is D3 plus 3 damage at Rend 2. Gurk's Lamprey Maw has got 3 attacks damage 3, and then Otto Scythe's got 4 attacks damage 2. It's not the most wonderful damage profile in the world, but it's pretty decent. The reason I think you're going to take the Maggotkin is because of the ability. Oh, I should also mention there is also a level 1 wizard in addition. 5-up ward save, level 1 wizard, War Master and unique, can only take 1 of them. If it's in your army, must be the general, unless there's another War Master, then you get to pick. Okay. So the ability that you're taking this for is the once per turn army reaction. You declared the counter charge command for this unit. And then you can use the Blighted Stampede ability. Pick up to 2 friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle units holding than 12 inches this unit to be the targets. Just to remind you, the counter charge ability is when you do a charge in your opponent's charge phase after they've done all their charges. After the counter charge command for this unit has been resolved, if this unit charged, each of the targets can immediately use the counter charge command in any order of your choosing without any command points being spent. Now, you do need to have successfully solved the charge, and your opponent is going to have done their movement and their charging before you are going to be able to activate this ability, meaning they could pretty much always stay out of range of Maggotkin. But in some cases, that's not going to be possible. You are going to need to be near objectives to grab objectives, or you could be threatening to potentially charge into your opponent's like area where they're doing battle tactics. But it is really, really hard to use. But having 3 units countercharge, I guess, is good. That would be the reason you bring them. Another reason maybe you're going to bring them is because of their unique spell, the Overgrowth of Flesh. It's cast on a 6, and you pick a visible enemy unit within 12 inches. Roll a number of dice equal to the target's health characteristic, and for each 5+, you inflict 1 mortal damage on the target, up to 7 mortal damage. Now, that's pretty nice. 7 mortal damage is pretty prodigious, especially in conjunction with maybe the disease points you can do. This guy is also really survivable, so it could be a good vector for spreading disease around. And lastly, he's got an ability called Horrific Opponent, where you subtract 3 from the control scores of enemy units while they're in combat with this unit. I'm not overly impressed by those abilities. Instead, the way I like to reduce my opponent controlling the score is to kill all their models. That seems like the most effective way to do it. So that's not good. I feel a little unsure about the Maggotkin. I feel like the Maggotkin wants to do a couple of things, and those things that it wants to do are not great. And obviously, the ability it has is nothing like bringing models back from the dead that we see on the Great Unclean One. Great Unclean One is also a better caster, but this guy does slightly more damage in combat, not much more damage in combat, and has got the counter charge ability. So I feel like, in my opinion, the Great Unclean One pips it at the moment. Our next unique hero monster is Morbid X Twiceborn. He's the first of the 3 Maggoth Lords. 14 health, 4-up save, and a 5-up ward save. It's okay combat profile, with 5 attacks doing damage 3, and another 5 attacks doing damage 2, with 3 attacks that can shoot into combat doing damage 1. The reason you're going to bring Morbid X Twiceborn is because of his ability to affect Nurglings. He's got a passive called Lord of Nurglings, where while any friendly Nurgling units holder than 12 inches, you ignore the first damage point that would be allocated to each of those units in the phase. Pretty nice, seeing as they also heal 3 at the end. And you add 3 to that unit control score, which is fine. Like, genuinely, pretty fine. But if we wanted to do even more damage with those Nurglings, like I said earlier, you can use the once per turn army and any combat phase Tide of Nurglings, where you pick a friendly Nurgling unit within this unit's combat range to be the target. You roll a dice on a 2+, the target's melee weapons have crit mortals for the rest of the turn. So you've got a load of attacks for 1 unit of Nurglings. Maybe you only just take 1 unit of Nurglings with this guy, or maybe you take a couple, I don't know, and then bring some Nurglings back from the dead from a Great Unclean One. That's pretty fun. This guy's also very survivable in his own right, thanks to the Gigantic Nurgling Kin ability, which is done at the end of any turn, where you heal X, this unit, where X is half the number of damage points this unit has rounding up. The way you assign damage to a unit is you just put damage next to them, and then as soon as they get to 14, for this guy, you would take them away. So if it's 8, then you're going to get 4 back at the end of any turn. That's pretty good. It's going to make this guy very survivable, especially as you immediately are going to go into a hero phase where you could then try and do a rally where you roll 6 dice and 4-ups. You're going to bring some wounds back. So a lot of healing here, or you can use a spell for an additional D3. It's going to be really hard to get rid of Morbid X, but is he going to do enough when he's there? That's a real question. I feel it only really works if you take a load of Nurglings. Our next Maggoth Lord is Blobe Rot Spud. Again, same survivability, 14 health, 4-up save, 5-up ward save. But Blobe is a level 1 wizard. Moves 8 inches, fast enough, I think, with control value 5 for grabbing those objectives and controlling them. Now, in combat, slightly less attacks with the Rider, the Harvestman's Scythe. Only 3 attacks, damage 2. But the Bilespurter's Claws have got 5 attacks, damage 3. And he's got this absolutely insane shooting attack, which is 7-inch range, which is 7 attacks. It hits on 2s, wounds on 4s, which is the bad part, but his rend 1 and his damage D3. In addition, he's got shooting combat. That's a pretty prodigious shooting profile that you can keep doing every single shooting phase using the command ability to shoot in your opponent's turn. I quite like that. Honestly, I think that's really good. And it probably puts his output even higher than the other Maggoth Lord we talked about. Now, being a level 1 wizard as well, he also brings utility. So whatever points cost that he costs, he's effectively 100 points cheaper because he's a wizard, because that's what you normally pay for a wizard. And this way, you've got an incredibly survivable wizard with 14 health, 4-up save, 5-up ward save. Now, the as well as being a wizard, he's got his own unique spell called the Miasma of Pestilence, which is cast on a 6. Pick a visible enemy unit within 12 inches to be the target, then make a casting roll. To the start of your next turn, each time you allocate any damage points that were inflicted by another friendly ability to the target, roll a dice. On a 4+, you allocate 1 additional damage point to the target. Now, don't be like me and get really excited when reading this, because it's actually pretty woeful. What it means is every time you use an ability, so fight is an ability as an example, if you've done any damage points with the whole of the fight ability, on a 4+, add 1. If you do a spell, add 1. Now, if you can get enough abilities, you know, as an example, if you were to do this on a unit and then you would charge them with a Beast of Nurgle, they'll do D3 mortals on the charge, +1 on a 4-up. Do the combat ability, 4+, add 1. But it's not a lot, right? But, you know, it's still some. So, and let me know if you've got it to work really, really well. And lastly, he's got an ability called Demon Flies, which is actually really strong, which is done in any combat phase once per turn. Pick each enemy unit within 7 inches of this unit to be the targets and roll a dice for each target. On a 4+, if it's 1 mortal damage on the target, really nice. And subtract 1 from hit rolls for the target's combat attacks for the rest of the turn. Now, board wide, it's not board wide, but 14 inches, 7 inches on either side of it. 4+, make units -1 to hit, feels really nice. So it's debuffing the enemy, it's giving you the opportunity to cast a spell, it's got a great shooting attack and can do some okay damage combat, and it's going to control a value of 5 on an objective. That doesn't feel bad at all. Our last Maggoth Lord is the Combat Maggoth Lord with 14 health and a 3-up armor save and a 5-up ward save, meaning this guy's going to be super tough to shift. Make units -1 to hit, make units -1 to wound with a, make this guy -1 to wound with a spell. You can really add to his survivability. Control value 5 for grabbing an objective, and then it's got 7 attacks from the rider that are damage 2 and 5 attacks from the mount, which are damage 3. The major issue here is the rend is just okay. Rend 1, rend 2. It's also got 1 shooting attack, which does do D6 damage, but again, it's got no rend, but is shooting into combat. It's got another ability called Grasping Tongue, which can be done in any combat phase, where you pick an enemy unit in combat this unit to be the target. You roll dice, and on a 3+, you add 1 to the wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle units that target that enemy for the rest of the turn. That feels really nice for the army, for being able to increase their output, especially on a unit that's also really survivable, like this guy who's going to hold objectives forever. And then he's got an ability called Acid Ichor, where any 6s to save, if this unit is targeted by any melee attacks, you're going to inflict a mortal damage back to that unit after the fight ability has been resolved for every 6 you make to save. And seeing as you're going to save a lot, you know, using all-out defense, so you've got a 2-up save, 5-up ward save, then use rallies, use a spell to be able to bring D3 heals back. You can keep this guy alive pretty nicely. Is he going to do enough damage? That's a real question. Like, Orgots versus unit of Playbearers. Is Orgots ever going to chew through a unit of Playbearers enough for him to be worth his time? Because the Playbearers are always going to hold that objective against Orgots until you're down to there only being 4 Playbearers left. So that's the real question you need to ask yourself points-wise. But otherwise, he's like mobile enough at 8 inches to go grab stuff, and he's going to pose a real threat to the enemy units, which I think is good. Our next unit is Gut Rot Spume. 7 health, 4-up save, and a 5-up ward save. And the reason that you are going to bring Gut Rot Spume in your army is because you want to get on the slime fleet and put a load of units into reserve. The Master of the Slime Fleet ability that you can do in the deployment phase lets you pick a regiment led by this unit to be the target that's not been deployed, and each unit in the target regiment is set up in reserve aboard the Slime Fleet. And what this means in your movement phase, if you can put all of those units wholly within 7 inches of the battlefield edge, well, first him, wholly within 7 inches of the battlefield edge, 9 inches from enemy units, then set up every other friendly unit that was aboard the Slime Fleet on the battlefield, wholly within 7 inches of the battlefield edge, wholly within 7 inches of this unit, and more than 9 inches from enemy units. So that is a very restrictive deep strike, meaning you've got to be very close to the battlefield edge, but it maybe means that you could potentially use do battle tactics with this guy, which is nice. Maybe with all your pre-game moving flying units, you can do a big alpha strike of everything going in, which could be fun. And in addition, he's got another ability called Flailing Tentacles, which are done in any combat phase, where you pick an enemy infantry hero in combat with this unit to be the target. You roll dice, and on a 3-up, the target has strike last for the rest of the turn. And infantry heroes normally aren't much of an issue, to be honest, and isn't much of a stress. But having make them strike last, I guess, is fine. He's okay in combat with 5 attacks that do damage too. Really ask yourself, do you want to deep strike a bunch of stuff? And if you can, and if you do, then you should take them. Our next hero is a mortal on top of a fly. The Lord of Afflictions has got 8 health with 3 up save, and has got 4 attacks in close combat, damage 2, but gets +1 damage on the charge because he's a cavalry unit. So it's going to be damage 3. And then it's got 6 attacks from the fly, like we saw with the other flies, which have no rend and a damage 1. But there is a way to add +1 rend to this, thanks to the Master of the Rot Fly's ability, which can be done in any combat phase. If this unit charged this turn, pick this unit up to 2 friendly +4 Blight Lord units holding within 12 inches, and you can add 1 to the rend characteristic of the target's companion melee weapons for the rest of the turn, meaning that's a lot of attacks that can get +1 rend. In addition, and maybe the main reason I would take this guy is his ability, Vectors of the Foulest Contagion, which is done in any combat phase. Pick up to 3 enemy units in combat with this unit to be the targets. Roll a d3 for each target on a 2+, inflict an amount of mortal damage on that unit equal to the roll. What I like about this is you could do this in conjunction, obviously, with the Great and Clean one, and disease points later on for just like a sheer, like, absolute cavalcade of like mortal damage that are just done in a certain section of the board, which could be genuinely very devastating. And most of these abilities, with the exception of disease, can't be counteracted as soon as you're in combat. So there's a lot of mortal damage to keep stomping on stuff, which I think could be really good. Other than that, incredibly survivable. 8 health, 3 up save, 5 up ward save, stick around in combat a lot. Could be given D6 heal at the end of every turn. That would be really good as well. I think he's pretty good. The next unit is the Lord of Blights. 7 health, 3 up save, and a 5 up ward save. Very survivable, which is good, because he kind of wants to be charged, which I know sounds odd. He's got 4 attacks in close combat, which is damage 3, and he's got anti-charge +1 rend. He's also able to give out anti-charge +1 rend to Putrid Blight Kings. The blighted weapons ability used by them, weapons used by them have anti-charge +1 rend while those units are holding within 12 inches of this unit. What this means is that if you did have a big unit of 10 Blight Kings, let's say, which is super survivable, they've got rend 1, that means they're going up to rend 2. If you were to make them be, and for the season that I'm recording this in, which is the start of Age of Sigmar 4, there's the ability to make it so you can reduce the armor, the number of attacks your opponent has when they charge in for an Honor Guard unit. And then this guy could also take the trait to make it so that if you charge in on a 4-up, you strike last. Now, it feels like that's much smarter to put on a Great and Clean one, but then you would just be making it so you have this basically block of dudes that if you charge that are holding an objective, then you're going to be in some trouble, and that's pretty funny. In addition, he's got an ability called Thrice Ripened Death's Heads, which can be done in any combat phase, where you pick an enemy unit that charges his turn and is in combat with this unit, you roll D3 on a 2+, you inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. And I know it sounds kind of odd to have an army that gets charged, gets stronger, and it might genuinely not be that good because your opponent might not charge you, but if it's the only thing to charge on the board, could work really well. Our next unit is the Harbinger of Decay, and the Harbinger of Decay has got 7 health, 3 up save with a 5 up ward save, and is a power level 1 priest. Now, this army doesn't have its own prayer lore, and therefore you're only ever going to be able to attempt the prayer that is located on his war scroll. That prayer is the Omens of Decay, which is chanted on a 4. You pick a visible enemy unit within 12 inches to be the target, then make a chanting roll. Subtract twice the current battle round number from the target's control score for the rest of the turn. If the chanting roll is 10 or more, this ability affects all enemy units within 12 inches. It's going to be really hard to get this unit in range to be able to chant the prayer and then be able to save up those points so you can do the more powerful version later. And ultimately, spending all those points just to reduce the control score, when what you should really be doing is killing those units so they have no control score, doesn't feel super effective. But you can combo this with things like the Maggotkin and also the trait that we looked at earlier to reduce the control score of units, for really dropping down the control score of units around you pretty aggressively, if that's a goal that you're trying to work towards. He's also got another ability called Knell of Doom, which is done once per battle, and you pick up to 3 in your hero phase. You pick up to 3 enemy units within 24 inches. Until the start of your next turn, you subtract 1 inch from the move characteristic of each target, and subtract 1 from the run rolls and charge rolls for each target. So that is pretty So that's going to really reduce their movement. And as we already know, there's a spell that you could do as well to do that. But I don't think this guy feels like he's going to do tons to support the rest of your army. He's just going to situationally debuff your army, which is not as good maybe as you casting the -1 to wound spell. So I don't think I love the Harbinger of Decay. The next unit we'll look at is a power level 1 wizard, a Rotbringer sorcerer. He's got 6 health, 5 up save, and a 5 up ward save. Pretty slow, and obviously isn't built to be into combat, but does have 3 attacks, damage D3. We love that, love that. But the ability that you're going to bring this guy for is the Tainted Sorceries, which you can do in your hero phase. Pick an enemy unit that was picked to be the target of a spell that was successfully cast by this unit this phase. Roll a dice on a 2+, subtract 1 from the ward rolls. Now that's pretty nice. -1 to your ward rolls is pretty good. Some armies really rely on those ward rolls just to survive. So -1, very effective. Wizards are about 100 points, or any wizard level is about 100 points. So if it's a cheap wizard, it might see play. Is he going to make it so that you're more drops in your army is the real trick, and you've already got such valued wizards like a Great and Clean one who are already a level 2 cast. But you might want this for another cast, bring some conjurations onto the table. The next unit is the Lord of Plagues, 7 health and a 4 up save and a 5 up ward save with 5 attacks that do crit mortals and damage 2. Now, the reason you want to take the Lord of Plagues is because you want to take loads of Blight Kings and you want to charge them. The first passive, the Lord of the Blight Kings, is going to add 1 to the charge roll, so +1 to charge, not charge dice, just to the result. So if you rolled an 8, you'd roll a 9 for friendly Putrid Blight Kings while they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit. Then you've got the 7-fold Slaughter ability, which is done in any combat phase, is we pick a friendly Putrid Blight Kings unit that charges this turn, is wholly within 12 inches unit to be the target. You roll a dice, and on a 2+, you add 1 to the attacks characteristic of the target's blighted weapons for the rest of the turn. That's quite nice. +1 attack. Now, Blight Kings already have a lot of attacks per model, so it's not like a 50% or even a 33% uplift in the number of attacks, but it is more attacks. But it's counterintuitive with how this unit works compared to our other hero that likes to have Blight Kings be charged. So maybe you have one guy charging Blight Kings, one guy with defensive Blight Kings as a combo, which I think could be quite interesting. And this guy makes Blight Kings get more successful charges, which is nice. But overall, I think you're going to do a lot of work to get just +1 attack on a unit. We're through the heroes, so now we're going to start looking at the mortal units. And the first unit is Putrid Blight Kings. They are a unit of 5 models, and each model in the unit has got 3 health with a 3 up save, which is a very good armor save, and a 5 up ward save, meaning this unit is built to be what we would call a bruiser unit, which means it can stand and fight for ages, even if it necessarily doesn't do a lot of output. Each model in the unit has got 4 attacks each. Therefore, a unit of 5 is going to have 20 attacks with +1 from the champion for 21. But a big reinforced unit of 10 is going to have 30 health on a 3 up save with a 5 up ward save, which is genuinely a terrifying unit to try to get rid of. And then it's going to have 41 attacks, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1. So they armor save and also health save versus like your Playbearers, which are just going to life save with their ward save. So those 2 different styles. And obviously you can use Blight Kings to either have more attacks on the charge, so 5 attacks each, or you can have +1 rend if you are charged for grabbing objectives and standing there. They are a real problem unit. That is a ton of health to try to get through, but they are different to Playbearers in that Playbearers are going to return from the dead, or might return from the dead, whereas this unit isn't going to return from the dead. So the real question you're going to ask yourself as a Nurgle player is, do you want the baked-in survivability, or do you want the opportunity cost of maybe bringing models back from the dead? Either way, they have a passive called Bloated Bulk, where you add 3 to this unit's control score, while each model of this unit is contesting an objective you control. So they're going to be better at holding an objective than normally they would. But a unit of 10 is still only going to be a control value of 10, plus also 1 for the banner, so control of 11. If you control an objective, control of 13. That's while they're alive. I guess the real question is, are they survivable enough? Do they do enough for the army? They're not fast, so you're not going to be able to score battle tactics really easily with them. Our next unit is a unit of Puscoil Blight Lords. This is a unit with 2 models in and can be reinforced to a unit of 4. 8 health on each model with a 4 up save and a 5 up ward save, and they move that fast 8 inches. Each model has got 4 attacks from the rider, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1, with charge +1 damage. To add to that, they get +1 rend on the charge. They add 1 to the rend characteristic of this unit's Fly Rider arsenal, For attacks at target units contesting an objective you do not control, they do not need to have charged. So you're contesting an objective you do not control. This does mean across a unit of 4, you're going to have 16 attacks, 3s and 3s, rend 2. You can get up to rend 3 at damage 1 or damage 2 on the charge. That's quite a lot of attacks. And then each one of the Rotfly's mouth parts has got 6 attacks, 4s and 3s. Oh, sorry, they don't get up to rend 3. They only get up to rend 2. 6 attacks each, 4s and 3s, rend nothing, damage 1. But there is a way to get +1 rend on that weapon, not on the rider's weapon. That's a lot. A unit of 4 of these is going to be 32 health on a 4-up save and a 5-up ward save, which is very survivable. Control value of 2, so a unit of 4 is going to be a control value of 8. And thanks to the, control value of 8. And the riders, not the riders, the mounts are still going to do a lot of attacks as well. And one of the fun things is we talked about being able to take the battle formation where you take 2 flying units and you put them 9 inches away from your opponent's lines. So now we can put 2 units of 4 flies in front of our opponent and then move and then charge in. And that is just an outrageous amount of output at the start of the game. Are you going to survive back? I don't know, but you're going to be there. And I guess that's worth stress testing, which I think is really fun. So yeah, absolutely excellent unit in my opinion. The last unit we're going to look at are Rotmire Creed. They are the Warcry warband, therefore they are not reinforceable. It's a unit of 10 models, with each one of the unit have 1 health with a 6-up save, but they do have a 5-up ward save, which is nice. They move 5 inches, and they are a missile infantry unit with 12-inch range on their shooting attacks with 2 shots each for 20 shots across the unit. Hit on a 4, wound on a 3, no rend, damage 1, but they do have crit auto wound. So that's a lot of shots you can just kind of keep pumping out. But your army isn't really shy of just doing a ton of attacks, especially from like flies. But realistically, is it going to do any damage? Well, if it does do any damage, you get to use the passive Virulent Concoctions. When using the Blessed by the Plaguefather ability, where you would start the disease activation train, you can pick an enemy unit that had any damage points allocated to you by this unit's shooting attacks this turn to be the target, even if that unit is not in combat, the friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle unit. This means you could potentially start applying diseases onto units that are not in combat, which is kind of okay. I don't hate this. Obviously, you can use Gut Rot Spume to bring this unit on the board edge, 9 inches away from the enemy, but hold it in 7 inches of board edge. Maybe start applying Contagion via that way. That's quite a cheap unit, quite cheap delivery system. I think it's a bit of a shame that this unit doesn't also apply disease as well. But, you know, it's nice to have the ability to do disease from range. And that is the Maggotkin of Nurgle read-through. This is our kind of first look. There's going to be more videos about the Maggotkin of Nurgle in the future. We will be breaking down we'll do some tier lists on the units. We'll start looking at lists that have done well. We'll start writing some lists and start building some fun little things. It does feel to me, at least on the first read, that the disease mechanic is going to be an incredibly hard mechanic to pop off and work, especially as there are several armies that have loads of very constant healing abilities. Troggoths, Soulblight Gravelords have got lots of healing that they can bring in. Sylvaneth, as an example as well, just going to be able to start doing some healing and removing your heal mechanic. I guess your disease is also, I guess, shutting down their healing, but not but not enough of shutting down their healing. Normally, the healing armies do more healing than you does more healing than you are able to do disease, which I think is a little bit of a disappointment, to be honest. But I think that there are some pretty mandatory choices. Mandatory choices, for example, I think is a Great Unclean one. I think that ability to bring, back. So yeah, it feels like the Great Unclean one feels fairly mandatory. While I think all of the units that you get for the Mortal faction are fine, they're very good, I am struggling to see where you'll do battle tactics from, especially some of the more mobile battle tactics, like being able to do board edges, or even going and grabbing terrain from your opponent. And the other battle tactics you do normally are predicated around killing your opponent's units. If you aren't able to kill your opponent's units, therefore, then you also can't do those as well. And that's another bit in the army I'm not really sure about. where you do all of the damage. Some other armies have very obvious choices like Varangard or Rotgut Troggoths or a bunch of other units like Witch Elves with 2 pairs of knives, but you don't necessarily have this in this build either. So you're going to have to play a very cagey game, and some of your cagey game is orientated around casting spells. For example, being able to do additional disease from a Great and Clean one with very few pluses to cast built into the army. That's also going to be a bit of a problem as well. Then there's some big major threats out there. You're going to want to keep your Great and Clean one away from stuff like Nagash that's going to kill you. You also don't have 3d6 charges, which I think means your mobility is also going to be an issue. But that's to say, you still have a very survivable army. So let me know what you think about this army. If you've been playing it, let me know what you think about it. Leave it in the comments below, because I know there are people desperate to find out how to play this army, right? So let me know what you think about this army. Let me know what you think of this video as well. And if you'd like to help support what I do as content, then you could, of course, join my Honest Wargamer Patreon. We've got a really active Discord talking about loads of things. Let me know what you think about it. And thanks for watching my video. I'll see you soon.